Okay, our next speaker really does not need a whole lot of introduction. Danny Scott's the immediate past president of SAGES, has had a long track record of accomplishment both at UT Southwestern, where he's the Dean of Simulation. He's been known for his education work. He's president of the Fellowship Council. And I mean, I could go on, but really you didn't come to hear me talk this morning. You came to hear Danny. And he's going to talk a little bit about the governance and structure of SAGES. I think there is some misconception about how things get done. I think all of us over the years have tried to be as transparent as possible. So Danny, if you could lay it out for people.
My pleasure. Thank you, David, for that introduction. My congratulations to Dan Jones on his presidency and for having the foresight to put this panel together and to have us all here today for this leadership program, and thanks to the organizing committee. I will certainly have a little bit of overlap, I think in a good way, with what Leanne just presented. Some of my words actually are identical to some of the words that she chose to describe our workings and organization. Some of my diagrams look similar, but oddly a little bit different. From there, I will take off. Here are my disclosures. I don't think any of these will really have relevance to my material that I'm presenting today. So as David said, I had the privilege of being the president from 2016 to 2017. And I can tell you that was a whirlwind tour. At times I made the analogy that I was drinking water out of a fire hose because there's so much going on in this organization. And the president serves a truly unique role, which I didn't really fully grasp the magnitude, the breadth, the acuity, the whole magnitude of that process until I was in that role. And I can tell you that was one of the best years of my life. It was the busiest year in my career, and it was certainly one of the most rewarding. Ironically, my SAGES story started in 1999 as well. And I was certainly introduced to SAGES by Dan Jones, and then I quickly met the whole family of people that mentored me for the next 15, 20 years. So it is true that if you put your foot in the door and are responsive and deliver and look for the opportunities, I think a lot of what Leanne told us about is extremely relevant and true for most of us that have been very involved with SAGES and have risen up through the ranks. So this past March at our annual meeting in Houston, we held a session the Monday night, really before the whole meeting started. And it was a mini leadership meeting. It was onboarding for new or existing committee members and chairs. And we went around the room and asked these folks that really wanted some tips and tricks about how to navigate our organization, what SAGES meant to them and why they got involved. And I think these quotes are very telling. I heard about SAGES from one of my mentors, and I think mentorship will continue to be an important theme for us. I presented my work, and I knew this was the place for me. Many of us feel that SAGES is home for our work and our professional activities. This society gets things done. A very simple statement, but I think a track record that SAGES has delivered on. It is because we have so many different kinds of people that we are successful. And yesterday at our board retreat, we heard about cognitive diversity, and I'll come back to that. This is where I met friends and colleagues that I can get help from whenever I need it. And certainly I would echo Leanne's thoughts about the friendships both in our professional lives as well as outside of our professional lives that so many of us have developed through this organization. The people and the culture at SAGES are different from other organizations, and I'll go into that culture, and I think it's part of our governance and our structure that allows us to perform at the high level that we do. At SAGES, I know our work has an impact on the field of surgery, and I think it's always very important to keep our mission in mind and a patient-centered focus that is always the undercurrent and the belief system that we have in this organization. And so we launched this campaign last year as a fundraiser for our foundation, I Love SAGES, a very simple thing to remind people about what this organization means and to look out for our longevity from a financial standpoint. So the SAGES mission statement roots us. It's about improving patient care. It's about doing so through education, research, innovation, and leadership in the field of gastrointestinal and endoscopic surgery, and certainly some offshoots thereof. And so when I think about our organization and our structure, what are we trying to get done? It's trying to fulfill this mission, and I think this mission is highly relevant. And so a few different things that went through my mind as I was creating this talk were some alternative titles: navigating internal and external politics. And I don't know if politics is the really correct term, but it's interactions, it's the engagement, it's the navigation internally within our organization, and then how do we interact with the world around us, with our patients, with surgeons, with other societies, and so on. I think a big part of leadership within SAGES is blossoming out a new idea, as you heard, getting consensus, getting support, oftentimes in a philosophical sense that this is important and relevant, but also in a financial sense because there are a lot of resources brought to bear by our organization, and finally getting stuff done. And that's almost a verbatim quote from Leanne's slide deck of "we can get stuff done." So my pyramid is pointing up, and a little bit different than Leanne's, a little bit different color, but a similar theme is that we have this wonderful grassroots organization of 6,000 plus members. And from that, the folks that want to become part of our leadership can volunteer for committees. We'll go into that a little bit. And then we have our governance structure as really the committees reporting to the board reporting to the exec, and a lot of vice versas, and I could draw more feedback loops here, but I think an undercurrent of open communication and free access between new members and people that have been vested in our society for quite some time is an undercurrent that's quite important. And through this structure, we are able to manage this big organization, both on an operational level, dealing with all the ongoing issues and projects that we have running and need to continue, and also in an innovative fashion to embrace new ideas and to blossom out new projects that will take us to the future. And so we'll start with the committees. There are 39 committees, and task forces for us are groups that are assembled as if they are a committee to look after a new initiative, a new project. And if they grow legs, so to speak, then we can vote them into becoming a committee by our bylaws with a board approval. And so some task forces kind of blossom and then they get their job done and they fade away. And other task forces evolve into a full-blown committee. We have some 700 people on our committees, and that's almost a sixth of our organization, or something pretty impressive, almost greater than 10%, I'd say. And so it's an opportunity for many, many people to get into this organization at a very accessible level, we hope, and we try to portray. The committees have responsibilities, the in-person meetings, as you heard, at the SAGES annual meeting, at the American College of Surgeons meeting, and then here at the November retreat, a lot of our committee leadership are asked to attend either the board meeting or the retreat or both. The leadership of the committees are the chairs and the co-chairs. And I would say on very productive committees, they're on phone calls at that leadership level with their staff or from BSC, our management company, monthly or at least every 2 months, running a project list, seeing where the progress is, and not letting things go stale between these every 6-month formal face-to-face meetings with the whole committee. And I think that's very important. And so it's really about project management, getting the work done of the committee that was decided upon and agreed upon, and consensus was built at the in-person face-to-face committee meetings and moving them along. As Leanne kind of alluded, there's a system within SAGES where each committee has an executive member, one of the officers, as a liaison. And that executive person is supposed to look after those activities and guide them, steer them. Not really interfere, not really dabble, and not really a top-down management scheme, but rather to let them know that they're on the right path, or to bring important issues to the executive committee that need further discussion or need to be vetted a little bit further. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Certainly, there are also working groups attacking specific projects within a committee. I think Leanne's example of Fuse is a good example, where I'm sure there are many different working groups to assemble the different chapters, to assemble the different materials, and so on. And so those are a common theme amongst our committees, is to have separate groups working on various parts and pieces. This is a self-peer or mentor-nominated process, and I think we're one of the only organizations that I've really been a part of where you can freely nominate yourself and have a high likelihood of getting on some committee. And it may not be one of the top-tier, really difficult to get on committees like the program committee and so on, but it certainly allows you a foot in the door and to make impressions and to be involved and to go from there. These are done, as Leanne said, by presidential appointment. It's on an annual cycle. Right after the annual meeting, the new president takes office and no longer is president-elect, but is now president, and that's the individual that combs through this massive list of volunteers and makes those selections with some pretty good help. And so here's a very busy slide, but that kind of really is accurate on how busy our organization is at a committee level. So these are all of our committees and the chairs and the dates and the times and the meetings during the American College of Surgeons meeting we just had in San Diego. And these typically will last an hour and a half, 2 hours, and bring 20 to 40 people together around a table to discuss all of the items that that committee is working on. Those committees have working groups as shown here. Just a couple of pictures to share with you. Typically a very smart group of individuals gathered around a table with an agenda talking about a lot of items, both old and new. And I think this is a good kind of summary of what one of the secret ingredients is a lot of teamwork. It's open communication and working together, and everybody recognizes that we all have special talents and that we're not experts in everything. And we go around the table with an awful lot of people from different backgrounds, different things to contribute. And I think that's really how we get all of this wonderful work done to carry our society forward, both on clinical projects, educational projects, research projects, and so on. And so it's quite simple. This is the annual email address that people can go to. And I think the simplest recipe that I advise people on is just write what your background is. I'm in practice, I'm a resident, whatever it is. I'm in academics, I'm in private practice, I do general surgery, I do colorectal, I do bariatrics, whatever your life nutshell is in 1 or 2 sentences. And then what are you interested in? And then volunteer. And say, I'd especially like to be on this committee, that committee, or this one, but if those are unavailable, I would readily accept any appointment open. And that's really the foot in the door. And as you heard, you'll hear this some more, is once you volunteer, the expectation is that you're responsive. And we have some inner jokes about people that groomed into leadership but needed a little bit of advice about answering emails. So I think that is a true statement. Next, in the importance of our organization to be involved is to get to know Sally Matthews. She's here today. She's our executive director, and her email is readily available to the world, and believe me, she will answer her emails. And so anything that pops up, a question, an interest, Sally can really direct the traffic within our organization, has done so beautifully for many, many years. Next in line is the Board of Governors. So I had to look at the letterhead and count down the list of our current board, and I counted 39 members. And it's committee chairs and select leaders within our organization that are still running projects, but not necessarily chairing a committee, because that opportunity may have been given to somebody else to groom into leadership. And we also have the American Board of Surgery, the American College of Surgeons, and the AMA reps on the board. The nominating committee, which I had the good fortune of chairing as the immediate past president, selects these individuals, and it's for a 3-year term. And the appointment can be renewed once, and that's according to our bylaws. And we've done that so that folks either rotate up to the executive committee or rotate off the board after a 6-year period, again in an effort to renew our leadership and give people opportunities to move forward. This entails a couple of in-person meetings. The SAGES annual meeting, we meet for about a half a day, and it's a jam-packed agenda, as you can imagine. And then we have the luxury of taking the time like we did yesterday, flying to a different city, and spending the whole day together to really identify the issues that we want to vet and discuss and have a more in-depth opportunity in arguably a relatively relaxed environment to really sit there and thoughtfully go through our issues. And there's voting both in person and by email, publications, guidelines, big issues that the organization faces, approving various committee initiatives that want to be launched, especially when there's financial implications, and so on. And so here's kind of a snapshot of our Board of Governors listing off of our website. And you can see there's a lot of different people on there, a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different interests represented, both clinically and in professional kind of arenas. And so here are a few different pictures. I don't know why, maybe a particularly memorable retreat was when Jerry Freed was president, and he had us to Montreal. And you can see various pictures from the reception that we have at these retreats and board meetings. The board meeting itself, the usual picture of a huge U-shaped table with microphones and agendas and people looking at their materials and discussing these issues. But I think this slide also represents some important values of the culture of our organization. And so you can see me and Ted Truss holding a special six-pack of beer that he brought me from New Hampshire called Hetty Topper that was particularly good. You can see Jerry addressing the group. You can see in the top right, second image, Barbara Bursey, who was our longtime executive director predating Sally Matthews, talking with Karen Freed, Jerry's wife. And we all know each other, and it's one big family. And the more you get involved with SAGES, and the more you get to this level where we're working together and having fun while we do it, it is one big family. And then you can see George Bursey in the bottom left talking to Aurora Pryor, who's sitting next to her daughter. And so I think there truly is a family sense of values in many more ways than one with our organization. This was the leadership retreat that I put on last year in New Orleans, my hometown, and so it was a nice excuse for me to leave Dallas and go see family on an extra trip. And we had a great time, and each of these takes on a little bit of a different flavor. The president really designs the program that he or she feels is most relevant to the organization and will get done what they want to achieve at that board meeting and at that leadership retreat. And we had various working groups in mind that you can see in the smaller breakout sessions, and then quite a rich discussion with the whole group assembled. So finally, the executive committee are the 7 officers of the organization. And these are selected very carefully and very thoughtfully by the nominating committee, which is really made up of a group of past presidents. We have a lot of help in knowing kind of people's backgrounds, what they've contributed to, and by this point we pretty much know one another fairly well, and who's got what skill sets and so on. And so this group contains the president, the immediate past president, who stays on the executive committee for 1 year and helps with a little bit of continuity and institutional memory. The president-elect, so you've got continuity between really 3 presidents at a time. The first vice president and second vice president serve 2-year terms, and then the secretary and treasurer serve 3-year terms. So you get the sense that this is intentionally staggered and gives people an opportunity, a rich opportunity oftentimes like I had, to move from vice president to treasurer to president-elect to president, past president, and to be a part of this governance for some time and to help guide the continuity. So the executive committee, each member, as I mentioned, serves as a liaison with the committee chairs, and this is an ongoing relationship. And it's on a PRN basis as needed. Many of us are very involved with the committees that we liaison with and are part of working groups and projects. The treasurer has a special role of chairing the finance committee, and you'll hear from Aurora Pryor on that. The immediate past president chairs the nominating committee and helps select the leadership of the future. The president, as I mentioned, is by far the busiest person on the executive committee. And it's really a credit to the servant leadership style of our organization that this person has worked to that point, embraces it, and is willing to hand-in-hand work with Sally Matthews, our executive director, usually on the phone with Sally 1 to 3 hours a week. Mine usually were towards 3 hours, and really helping guide the day-to-day management, the week-to-week management, and the overall visions for the group. And so the executive committee comes together monthly on some fairly lengthy calls, and then ad hoc as needed and ongoing communications, multiple in-person venues throughout the year to really look after the strategy and so on. And so this is a sample of our agenda for the executive committee from the American College of Surgeons meeting, where we're meeting 4 hours on a Tuesday night to go through all of our liaisons and then several other agenda topics, which I just kind of left out. The executive committee also can do a retreat in the summer, which we've been doing for the last couple of years, just to deal with really all of the issues that we are facing. We certainly have some time to spend with one another. Usually our meetings are over dinner and with lengthy agendas to boot. We also have projects and special retreats. As you heard, the Fuse Committee had to have many retreats, and listed here are just some other examples that I could come up with. And this is how we get smart people in the room dedicated for 1 or 2 days to really move the ball forward. We did so a year plus ago here in Boston for the Curriculum Task Force and the SAGES University Master's Program. We had a retreat last summer facing the technology issues of our society, and that work is really now underway quite nicely with our organization-wide learning management system, new social media efforts, and website redesigns. And so ideas definitely percolate up from the committees, and that's why we're always looking for new talent and bright individuals with diverse backgrounds. When they hit financial and strategic important priority levels, that's when the board and the executive committee weighs in and helps guide these projects. The executive committee, I'd say, gives oversight and deals with the operational aspects of our organization. And then the board is where we can really gain consensus and approval. And so you heard some of these terms from Leanne. We wish to be the nimble, effective, cutting-edge society. And we have to balance that with the challenges that an organization of 6,000 people faces of being bureaucratic, being ineffective, or stale. And so the analogy I like is the speedboat versus the aircraft carrier. We want to be the speedboat and react to the world around us in a nimble, cutting-edge fashion and make turns and speed fast when we have to our endpoints, and not be the aircraft carrier that's very difficult to change in directions. And so I'd say this is my analogy, is that we wish to be the transformative society where we have an awful lot of people on our ship helping us and driving us at light speed towards our goals in a very different fashion. And I like this Star Trek quote about there's no such thing as the unknown, only things temporarily hidden, temporarily not understood. And that's at the root of SAGES, is to not fear going where no one has gone before, and to innovate and to explore in an effort to improve patient care through our mission. We have a great deal of wisdom that gets brought to bear to these discussions through our 36 years of leaders listed here that really do provide mentorship and guidance and help us steer this ship. And the culture of SAGES, I think, is the other special aspect that helps us be transformative, is there is arguably a true flat hierarchy as evidenced by our Friday night Meet the Leadership reception, where new people can meet the committee chairs, the board members, the executive committee, and then we all go out and have a party afterwards at the sing-off. We can also have very serious conversations and discuss openly the issues that we face because we all think differently, we have cognitive diversity, and we all bring our different ideas to the table, debate them in a healthy and often rigorous fashion, and then leave the room with consensus, and that allows us to accomplish our mission. And so just as Captain Kirk leads the Enterprise on these new explorations, I had to do this one new for Dan. You know, we have the executive committee that really helps kind of guide this whole organization, keep us nimble with the beautiful backing and synergies of all of our bright people that are willing to volunteer, give their time on our committees, rise up to leadership through the board, and keep us in great shape. So with that, I'll conclude, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Danny, for that excellent summary. Before we get into sort of finances, I'd just like to make a couple of editorial comments as a past president. And I've had the honor of serving as president of, I think, 3 large national organizations. And SAGES is unique in terms of its upward mobility. I mean, you really are up and out, and then you're put out to pasture, which I think is actually very healthy and good for the organization. If you look at the age of many of the presidents, they're in their 40s or early 50s. There's not a lot of 60-year-old guys or girls that are leading this organization because they're already through the up and out. So there is this opportunity. I think it's by design that people move through the organization at a younger age and hopefully at a somewhat faster pace than some of the others. Another sort of unique characteristic which facilitates this, and structurally I just want to comment on this, is the size of the Board of Governors. You've seen this twice now, the diagram of the pyramid, but actually to participate in a leadership role in a board level, there are 39 seats, which is an awful lot. I would compare it to another large GI society where there are 12. And some are even smaller than that. And especially if you contrast this with, say, the American College of Surgeons and the age of the regents and so forth, you realize that this remains a young person's society. And then the last thing I wanted to comment on, which was tangentially touched on by the previous 2 speakers, is if I look at my closest friends, professional friends, I've been at Mass General for many years, and I have a lot of really good friends there. I have a lot of good friends in Boston. But some of my very best friends are in Chicago, are in Strasbourg, are in Buenos Aires. And all those relationships were really formed through SAGES and through participating in projects and working with these men and women and their lifelong friendships. And I think that's one of the great values of getting involved in this organization, to meet like-minded people from really around